My son-in-law thought the key to my safe held the secret to his fortune. He was correct, but not in the manner he expected. He imagined discovering my entire nest egg. Instead, he uncovered a carefully prepared dossier that would dismantle his schemes. What he attempted in the shadows of my office, assuming I was sound asleep, exposed a reality that would fracture our household and finally liberate my daughter. Before I describe how we arrived at that fateful evening, one that altered our lives forever, I would love to hear where you are tuning in from. Please share in the comments below. And if you have ever had to set firm boundaries with your own relatives, tap that like button and subscribe. It reassures us that we are not isolated in these struggles. The entire ordeal began, as many conclusions do, during a dinner I had no desire to attend. The eatery was the sort my son-in-law, Michael, adored. It was noisy, exorbitant, and packed with individuals flaunting their achievements to each other. The tinkling of glasses and the subdued buzz of pretentious discussions felt like a dialect I had long forgotten. Across the table, Michael twirled a glass of red wine that exceeded the cost of my monthly groceries. His expression blended conceit and urgency, a combination I had grown all too familiar with. My daughter, Emily, sat next to him, appearing drained and weary, merely poking at a salad she had no plans to consume. After his third glass, Michael leaned in, resting his hands on the table as though declaring a major business deal. He wore that predatory glint in his eyes, the one that surfaced whenever he detected wealth. My wealth. Virgil. He started, his tone a bit too elevated, attracting glances from the adjacent diners. We must discuss your holdings seriously. I simply stared at him, my fork suspended midway to my lips. He pressed on without pause, the alcohol fueling his avarice. You are perched on a treasure trove, a genuine treasure trove. That home, mortgage-free for 35 years. The reserves, the portfolios. It is stagnant capital. Virgil, it is idle. He waved his arm broadly, almost toppling his wineglass. The economy is primed for prospects at this moment. I possess this innovative project, a true breakthrough. We are discussing a 400% yield in 24 months. However, it requires funding. It demands foresight. He then boldly laid a hand on Emily's shoulder. You wish to witness Emily enjoying the existence she merits. Correct. You do not want her fretting over tomorrow, do you? The inquiry lingered in the atmosphere, weighty and toxic. It was a masterstroke of coercion, portraying me as an egocentric elder obstructing my own daughter's joy. I glanced at Emily, imploring with my gaze for her to intervene, to safeguard me, to establish limits. Yet she merely gazed downward at her hands, clenched so firmly that her knuckles blanched. Her quietude was her response. It was a disloyalty more profound than any utterance Michael could have made. It revealed that, on some level, she concurred with him, viewing me not as her parent, but as a financial resource. The restaurant's clamor receded. All I perceived was the ticking of an absent clock, counting down the concluding moments of the family I believed I possessed. I deliberately set my fork and knife upon the plate. I regarded Michael's complacent countenance, then Emily's diverted stare. A deep chill permeated my chest, quenching the remaining sparks of optimism. I delved into my pocket, retrieved my wallet, and laid $70 on the table to settle my portion, and a substantial gratuity. I rose, my joints slightly sore. I am feeling somewhat fatigued, I stated, my tone even, concealing the turmoil within me. You two savor the remainder of your night. and I departed, abandoning them in the lavish, oppressive hush. The journey home blurred with street lamps and recollections. Each stoplight offered a respite, a chance for another shortfall to emerge. I recalled the $7,000 I had provided Michael 6 years prior for an unbeatable software venture that vanished without evidence. He had termed it initial funding. I now understood he was merely sowing seeds of dishonesty. I remembered the $12,000 3 years afterward, a temporary advance to aid his advertising firm through a liquidity shortfall. That sum was never referenced again. Most painfully, I recollected the dialogue I overheard 18 months ago, when Michael urged Emily to liquidate the investment certificates her mother had bequeathed her. "It is our funds, darling," he had murmured, his tone a poisonous hush. "It is for our tomorrow." My spouse, departed for 12 years, had diligently amassed that sum to grant Emily a safeguard, a fragment of assurance that belonged solely to her. And Michael had persuaded her to squander it on one of his transient delusions. This was not the initial occasion he had targeted my family's stability. But as I entered my driveway and switched off the engine, I vowed to myself that it would be the final one. I stepped into the residence I had shared with my wife for 35 years. I refrained from illuminating the lights. I did not require them. I knew every corner of this space intimately. I settled into my aged armchair in the den, the obscurity enveloping me like a coverlet. The dwelling was profoundly quiet, a sharp contrast to the disorder in my thoughts. For 90 minutes, I permitted myself to experience the complete burden of it all, the sorrow for the daughter I had forfeited, the fury toward the individual who had seized her from me, the disillusionment in myself for permitting it to persist for so long. Then, a transformation occurred. The anguish did not vanish, but it solidified. It evolved from a fervent, chaotic sentiment into something frigid, solid, and keen. The mist of mourning dissipated, and in its stead emerged an utter lucidity of intent. I was no longer merely a melancholic elder. I was Virgil Reynolds. For 35 years, my profession had involved examining a firm's records and uncovering the narrative concealed within the figures. I pursued deceit. I revealed falsehoods embedded in ledgers and fiscal reports. I had been retired for 8 years, but the abilities, I recognized, do not simply fade. They remain latent, awaiting a purpose to activate. And Michael had just supplied me with the paramount purpose of my existence. I arose and proceeded to my modest home workspace. I activated my vintage desktop computer. It hummed to life, a recognizable, soothing noise. I accessed a directory concealed deep within the storage drive, a directory secured by an intricate password. Within resided a solitary encrypted spreadsheet file. I launched it. It was a private record I had maintained for years, a practice from my career. I added a fresh section at the base of the document. I did not title it Michael or Domestic Issue. I labeled it with the exactitude of my previous existence. I entered case file Hayes Michael. In the initial cell beneath a column marked Date, I inputted today's date. Under a column marked Incident, I noted public request for resources at supper. E. Reynolds compliant via reticence. And under a concluding column marked Measures Needed, I composed a solitary phrase. Commence comprehensive fiscal and history inquiry. Aim resource safeguarding and hazard reduction. The conflict had commenced, and he remained unaware. In the ensuing weeks, my residence transformed into a surveillance station. I was no longer a parent or a grandparent, but a data collector amassing information on an adversarial subject. When Emily and Michael visited for their now mandatory weekend gatherings, I observed them with a fresh, impartial sharpness. I detected elements I had formerly overlooked. The manner Michael avoided direct eye contact with me. The way Emily's chuckles never touched her eyes. They were enacting a facade of contentment, and I was the spectator they aimed to deceive. One weekend, a sparkle of silver on Michael's wrist drew my attention. It was a fresh timepiece, a bulky, showy item, with a label I identified as ridiculously costly. He noticed my gaze and nonchalantly adjusted his cuff downward, merely a small indulgence for myself. He remarked with a casual flick of his hand. "Operations have been challenging. You must commemorate the minor triumphs. You understand." This occurred less than 6 weeks after he had openly humiliated me for not converting my lifelong accumulations into his revolutionary endeavor. The inconsistency was so overt, so offensive. It bordered on humorous. I merely nodded gradually, storing the insight in my mental dossier. Later that day, while I feigned absorption in a novel in the den, Michael exited to the patio for a phone conversation. I situated myself near the kitchen pane, which overlooked the deck. His tone was subdued and strained, a marked difference from the relaxed allure he displayed indoors. I could not discern every syllable, but I captured sufficient fragments. Expressions wafted through the mesh door like noxious dust. "Require an additional postponement. I informed you the remittance is forthcoming. Merely a minor setback." And then, more insistently, "Listen, I cannot converse presently. Do not dial this line again. Do not contact the residence." He terminated the call and lingered there briefly, passing a hand through his impeccably groomed hair. His posture sagged. Upon re-entering, the charismatic veneer was flawlessly reinstated. He inquired if Emily was prepared to depart, and the act concluded for the day. My neighbor, Susan Thompson, visited for coffee the following morning. She is a retired legal assistant, keen as a blade, with the straightforward demeanor I have always valued. We sat on my veranda, observing the neighborhood, a custom we had upheld for years. It was the sole location where I felt I could express myself with some candor. I did not disclose everything, not immediately, but I recounted the supper, the coercion. Susan listened attentively, her eyes fixed on the avenue. When I concluded, she savored a deliberate sip of her coffee. "Virgil," she uttered, her tone soft yet resolute. "How much have you bestowed upon them throughout the years?" The query was blunt, and it unsettled me. I began to evade, but she raised a palm. "I am not critiquing. I am inquiring as a companion because what you depicted is not a relative seeking assistance. It is a hunter probing the barriers." Her statements resonated. I proceeded to describe the initial payment I had furnished for their first home, an amount that had significantly diminished my pension reserves. I explained how I had rationalized it to myself, convincing myself it was a commitment to my daughter's fulfillment. That was not a commitment. "Virgil," Susan remarked gently, "that was a rescue. And once you rescue someone, they learn they need not master swimming." She directed a finger at me. "That supper, the overt pressure, the discussion of idle funds, those are all enormous waving warning signs. He is evaluating you. He is determining how much he can press before you yield." Her counsel reinforced the nebulous strategy forming in my thoughts. It was time to cease observing and commence erecting my safeguards. The subsequent day, I arranged for a new alarm system. I informed Emily and Michael it was due to my advancing age, a touch more absent-minded, and desiring added protection. Michael deemed it an excellent notion. cannot be overly cautious nowadays. Virgil, he declared, patting my shoulder. He was oblivious that he was endorsing the erection of his own enclosure. The setup included 5 cameras. I positioned one above the entrance, one above the rear, and one overseeing the garage path. The 5th one I installed personally after the installer departed. It was a compact, unobtrusive spherical camera, scarcely visible in the nook of my workspace. It offered a flawless high-resolution perspective of the aged metallic gray vault in the corner. The vault Michael presumed contained the resolution to his dilemmas. The snare was now prepared. All I required was the proof to lure it. My own dwelling was no longer a secure venue for my probe. I commenced visiting the community library 4 counties away. It was nameless, serene, and provided complimentary rapid internet. I experienced a recognizable excitement as I settled at a booth in the rear. The aroma of aged volumes and particles in the atmosphere. It was the excitement of the pursuit. I was reinstated in my domain. I initiated with official documents, the bedrock of any monetary examination. I queried for enterprises listed under Michael Hayes's name. A roster of 8 limited liability companies emerged. Superficially, it appeared remarkable, akin to the collection of a bustling innovator. But I understood otherwise. I verified the enterprise locations. One was a postal box at a shipping outlet. 3 others were registered to an identical address in Nevada, an infamous sanctuary for dummy entities. The rest were connected to remote office providers in various states. There was no tangible structure to any of it. They were phantoms, fabricated to convey the mirage of essence. This was a traditional deception ploy. Next, I ventured to the murkier realms of the web. I sought Michael's name and the titles of his spectral firms on financier discussion boards and oversight platforms. It did not require much time to locate what I sought. A discussion on a micro-investment site was headed, "Alert Michael Hayes and Prospect Capital Fraud." My pulse quickened. I selected the link. I devoted the subsequent 3 hours perusing a catalog of sorrow and indignation. Scores of individuals, modest financiers, pensioners, folks who had been convinced to relinquish their reserves, all narrating the identical tale. Michael had enchanted them with assurances of extraordinary profits from a groundbreaking novel innovation. He had displayed polished pamphlets and fabricated endorsements. He had instilled a feeling of immediacy, a unique opportunity. Then, following their transfer of funds, the correspondence would grow irregular. The pledged reports never materialized. The portal darkened. Michael Hayes, the magnetic pioneer, merely evaporated, leaving them with naught but vacant vows and depleted accounts. I reproduced every individual entry. The sheets accumulated beside the library terminal, a tribute to his ruthlessness. He was not merely an unsuccessful executive striving to succeed. He was a career hunter who exploited faith and aspiration. He was not solely a peril to my economic stability. He was a peril to my daughter, and I had unwittingly welcomed him into the core of my kin. I arranged the reproduced sheets into an orderly stack. My hands firm, the wrath persisted. A frigid, rigid lump in my abdomen. But now it possessed an ally, an unyielding determination. I was no longer merely constructing a barrier. I was assembling a prosecution. My own residence was no longer a secure venue for my probe. It was a platform, and I was simply a performer upon it. The genuine labor, the profound labor, had to occur elsewhere. Thus, I initiated a fresh regimen. 4 times weekly, I would travel to the community library in a city 30 miles distant, a locale where no one recognized my visage. I sensed a recognizable excitement as I settled at a booth in the rear, the aroma of aged volumes and particles in the atmosphere. It was the excitement of the pursuit. I was reinstated in my domain, a forensic auditor tracking a falsehood. I commenced with the fundamentals, the electronic traces that everyone abandons. I queried for enterprises registered under Michael Hayes's name in the State Commerce Repository. A roster of 8 limited liability companies emerged. Superficially, it appeared remarkable, like the collection of a bustling, varied innovator. But I knew that a firm's enrollment is merely its public facade. The authentic narrative is always in the particulars. I selected the first, Hayes Ventures LLC. The address indicated was a mailing service in a commercial center. The second, Summit Worldwide Enterprises, was registered to a postal box at a shipping outlet. The third and fourth were linked to a single address in Nevada, an infamous sanctuary for anonymous dummy entities. They were phantoms, electronic beings fabricated to convey the mirage of essence where none existed. This was not the imprint of a legitimate executive. This was the labor of a swindler erecting a fragile structure, a man who desired to appear prosperous without ever generating a solitary item of worth. For a man like me, who had devoted his life to appreciating concrete resources and honest toil, it was a deep affront. With the corporate frameworks outlined, I advanced to the murkier realms of the web. I began seeking Michael's name and the titles of his spectral firms on financier discussion boards and oversight platforms. It did not require much time to locate what I sought. The web never truly erases. I discovered a discussion on a micro-investment site that chilled my veins. It was titled in bold capitals, Alert Michael Hayes and Prospect Capital Global Fraud. Prospect Capital Global was the 6th LLC on my roster. I selected the link. For the subsequent 3 hours, I remained immobile. I perused a catalog of sorrow and indignation. Scores of individuals, modest financiers, pensioners, an educator who had committed her annuity, a youthful pair who had utilized their nuptial reserves, all narrating the same nauseatingly recognizable tale. Michael had enchanted them. He had encountered them via community associations, religious gatherings, and regional commerce assemblies. He had dazzled them with assurances of extraordinary profits from a revolutionary novel, sustainable power innovation. He had displayed polished pamphlets, refined appearing graphs, and fabricated endorsements from content patrons. He had instilled a sense of intense immediacy, a unique opportunity that would conclude imminently. Then, after they had transferred the funds to the Prospect Capital Global account, the correspondence would grow irregular. The pledged monthly reports never materialized. The firm's portal suddenly darkened, and Michael Hayes, the magnetic pioneer who had been their companion and economic rescuer, merely evaporated. The contact number was severed. The messages rebounded. He abandoned them with nothing but valueless equity documents, vacant vows, and the crushing humiliation of having been so completely duped. I reproduced every individual entry, every charge, every frantic appeal for details. The sheets accumulated beside the library terminal, a tribute to his ruthlessness. He was not merely an unsuccessful executive struggling to endure. He was a career hunter who nourished on the faith and aspiration of decent folks. He was not solely a menace to my economic stability. He was an ethical void, and he was resting in my daughter's chamber. I had embraced him into my abode. I had clasped his hand. I neatly arranged the reproduced sheets, my hands entirely firm. The wrath persisted. Naturally, a frigid, rigid lump in the depths of my stomach. But it had been purified. It was no longer a chaotic, sentimental response. It was a frigid, unadulterated energy. My goal had altered. This was no longer about shielding my resources. This was about equity. It was about honoring the remembrance of my wife, who had always been cautious of Michael. It was about rescuing my daughter from the man she could not perceive. I was no longer merely constructing a barrier. I was assembling a prosecution, and I would be the most scrupulous, unyielding accuser he had ever confronted. The proof I had amassed at the library felt like a heavy burden in my satchel. It was a compilation of unprocessed data, a narrative of betrayal conveyed in captures and official submissions. But data by itself is impotent. To exert any genuine impact, it needed to be molded into an instrument, or preferably an armament. And for that, I required an expert. Susan had provided me with a name, inscribed on a compact, crisp professional card: Robert Lawson, attorney at law. The card indicated he focused on inheritance planning and resource safeguarding. It was precisely what I necessitated. His workplace was in a venerable, reputable stone edifice in the city center, the type with a sturdy maple door that seals with a gratifying thump. The interior air carried the scent of aged documents, citrus cleanser, and serene assurance. There were no ostentatious contemporary artworks on the partitions, merely framed credentials and racks of hide-bound juridical tomes that appeared to have resided there for generations. It was a chamber that assured privacy and proficiency. Robert Lawson was a gentleman in his early 70s with a serene, vigilant stare that overlooked nothing. He attended without disruption as I outlined my circumstances. I did not unveil the proof of Michael's deceptions yet. That was for a distinct stage of the confrontation. For now, I depicted the dilemma in the most arid, most impartial terms feasible. I informed him I possessed a solitary successor, my daughter Emily. I informed him I was worried that her spouse, Michael Hayes, was economically irresponsible and controlling. My declared objective, I clarified, was to guarantee that the resources I had accumulated over a lifetime would be conserved for my daughter's enduring stability and shielded from the sway and possible demands of her present spouse. He nodded gradually, assimilating the details, the most direct method. "Virgil," he stated, his tone deliberate, "is to revise your testament. We can configure it to position her bequest into a testamentary fund that engages upon your demise, with an external administrator to oversee the finances." I had already contemplated that. "That is insufficient," I responded, inclining forward. "A testament can be disputed. After I am departed, Michael could attempt to have Emily contest it. He could engage counsel to assert I was not mentally sound, that my daughter improperly swayed me against him. It would evolve into a prolonged, costly, and repulsive battle, and he would deplete her bequest, covering the juridical expenses. I require something more enduring. I require a stronghold." A spark of comprehension traversed Lawson's visage. He acknowledged the term. He recognized the category of client I was. I was not merely preparing for demise. I was readying for conflict. "I comprehend," he stated, interlacing his fingers. "In that instance, we are not discussing a testament. We are discussing an unalterable fund." He elucidated it to me, although I already grasped the essentials. It was a distinct juridical body. I would convey my resources, the residence, the investment collection, the reserves into the possession of the fund. I would no longer possess them outright. The fund I could serve as the administrator for as long as I endured, directing the resources, but they would be juridically isolated, protected from any forthcoming assertions, lenders, or litigations. They would be outside Michael's grasp. Presently and eternally, It was precisely the stronghold I necessitated. The fund will have one recipient, I declared, my daughter Emily. And the conditions of allocation? Lawson inquired, drawing a notepad nearer. This was the juncture. This was the cornerstone of the whole framework. The fund will furnish for her fundamental necessities and any health crises throughout her existence, overseen by an institutional administrator after I am gone, I stated, my tone as firm as a physician's grasp. Nevertheless, the complete core of the fund, the whole bequest, will only be dispersed to her directly under one particular stipulation. I halted, encountering his stare, that she is no longer juridically wedded to Michael Hayes, either via his demise or via a termination of their union. Lawson's writing instrument ceased. He regarded me over his spectacles. The expert composure in his eyes was supplanted by a spark of human intrigue. This is a very precise and very limiting stipulation. Virgil, a tribunal might perceive it as retributive. Are you sure I reclined in the comforting mass of the hide chair and exhaled a breath I had not realized I was retaining? Robert, I stated, employing his given name for the initial occasion. Allow me to recount about my wife Margaret. I narrated how, when Emily first introduced Michael home 15 years prior, Margaret had been courteous, enchanting even, but later that evening, after he had departed, she and I were seated on the veranda swing. I recalled the fragrance of her evening blooming flowers in the breeze. She was silent for an extended period, and then she uttered something I never erased. There is a craving in that young fellow's gaze. She had murmured, and it is not for our daughter. It is for what he believes our daughter can provide him. I had dismissed it then as a mother's excessive guardianship. I had perceived a magnetic, ambitious youth. She had perceived a hunter. As the years progressed and Margaret's well-being started to deteriorate, her concerns regarding Michael only intensified. In her concluding months, we had a dialogue in her medical chamber. She compelled me to vow, safeguard her. Virgil, she had implored, her tone feeble, when I am gone, you must be the one who perceives clearly for us both. Safeguard our child from him. I had vowed, but for 12 years since her departure, I had faltered. I had selected harmony over safeguarding. I had facilitated Michael's conduct with my reticence and my finances, all to evade discord, to evade distressing Emily. I am not undertaking this to penalize him. I informed Lawson, my tone dense with sentiment. I did not attempt to conceal it. I am undertaking this to honor a vow to my wife. I am erecting the barriers around my daughter that I neglected to erect for the past decade. This fund is not a penalty. It is a shield. It is a rescue vessel. She can elect to board it, or she can elect to remain on his foundering craft. But the election will be hers, and the rescue vessel will be there awaiting her. Robert Lawson attended to the whole narrative without a syllable. When I concluded, the expert detachment was absent. He merely nodded. I comprehend entirely. Virgil, he stated, we will prepare the papers precisely as you have designated. The rescue vessel will be prepared. The following week, I returned to his workplace to endorse the documents. The papers were substantial, replete with dense juridical terminology, but I understood their significance. I was endorsing away my residence. I was endorsing away my lifelong reserves. The writing instrument felt weighty in my grasp as I inscribed my name repeatedly. Each character was a stone being positioned in the barrier of the stronghold. Each endorsement was a fastener driven into the sarcophagus of Michael Hayes's aspirations. When I completed, I sensed a peculiar sensation of buoyancy. I had relinquished ownership of all I possessed, but in doing so, I had reclaimed something far more precious: authority. I exited that workplace into the luminous afternoon sunlight. The stronghold was constructed. The subsequent action was his. The juridical stronghold was constructed, its barriers invisible but sturdier than metal. The unalterable fund ensured that my heritage would be shielded from the exterior. But I knew Michael. He would not assault the stronghold from the exterior with attorneys. His approach was to infiltrate, to operate like a burglar in the darkness, to seize what he deemed his entitlement. My next duty was to ready a reception for him. The proof I had amassed from the library was condemning, but it was indirect. It demonstrated a pattern of betrayal. I necessitated something more. I necessitated irrefutable evidence. I necessitated an offense. There was a dangling strand I had not been able to tug on independently. A mention in one of the discussion boards to a substantial influx of capital into one of Michael's dummy entities approximately 3 years ago, directly amid the outbreak. The chronology was dubious. It was time to invoke a debt. I contacted Alex Mitchell, a young fellow I had guided during my final years at the organization. I had instructed him the traditional craft of tracing a document trail, and he had instructed me that in the contemporary realm, every document also possessed an electronic specter. He was now a premier digital security examiner, and he owed me for assisting him secure his initial major advancement. I dialed him on a protected connection. "Alex," I stated, proceeding directly to the matter, "I need you to investigate something for me discreetly. It is a personal affair." I provided him the title of Michael's LLC and the approximate date of the transaction. "I simply have an ill sensation about it." "Can you discern where the funds originated?" Alex was silent briefly. "You know, I cannot access financial records outright." "Virgil, that is unlawful." "I know," I responded. "I am not requesting that, but governmental allocations, specific varieties of advances. Those leave a public imprint if you know where to search. Just examine what you can discover in the public sphere. Treat it like a riddle." He laughed. "You always adored a fine riddle." "All right. Virgil, for you, I will investigate. I will contact you in a couple of days." He contacted in 8 hours. The rapidity of the response indicated he had uncovered something noteworthy. "Virgil," he stated, and the customary joviality was absent from his tone. It was supplanted by a somber expertise. "Are you seated?" "I am," I stated, my hold tightening on the handset. "The capital influx was not an investment," Alex stated. "It was an advance. Specifically, it was a salary safeguarding program advance. An SPP advance." The breath escaped my lungs. The SPP advances were component of the administration's epidemic relief initiative, intended to assist modest enterprises maintain their staff on compensation during the restrictions. The regulations were stringent, and the sanctions for deceit were harsh. "How much?" I inquired, my tone scarcely audible. $200,000, Alex responded. He submitted through a digital creditor, asserting his firm, Hayes Ventures LLC, had 20 staff members and a monthly compensation of $80,000. I examined the corporate submissions I had reproduced, which were dispersed across my workstation. Hayes Ventures LLC, registered to a postal box. The firm had no physical site, no portal, and according to the state revenue documents I had obtained, it had never submitted compensation taxes because it had never possessed a solitary staff member. "It is deceit." "Alex, is it not?" I stated, though I already knew the response. "It is not merely deceit." "Virgil," Alex stated, his tone subdued and grave, "this is a national offense, electronic deceit, financial institution deceit. They do not regard this lightly. Individuals are serving substantial sentences for this. I am transmitting you the secured file with the submission number and the public verification of the advance forgiveness he requested and obtained. He asserted he utilized the funds to preserve 20 positions that never existed, and the administration erased the advance. He simply retained the capital. Alex halted. Whatever this individual has inflicted upon you, Virgil, it is 1,000 times graver than you imagined. Exercise caution. After I terminated the call, I sat in quietude for an extended period. The ultimate component of the enigma had just locked into position. This was the irrefutable evidence. This was the offense. Michael had not merely defrauded a handful of optimistic financiers. He had pilfered from the American populace during a nationwide catastrophe. He had capitalized on a calamity for individual benefit. Any residual fragment of compassion I might have harbored for him, any notion that he was merely a frantic man making poor decisions, dissipated in that instant. Then I commenced labor. I traveled to a round-the-clock duplication center, and for the subsequent 4 hours, I scrupulously compiled my prosecution. I reproduced Alex's discoveries, the solid proof of the deceptive SPP advance submission, and its forgiveness. I reproduced the corporate enrollment papers for all 8 of his dummy entities. I reproduced every individual entry from the financier discussion boards, emphasizing Michael's name each occurrence. I generated diagrams illustrating the influx of capital into his accounts and the absolute absence of any legitimate enterprise activity emerging. I labored with the concentration and exactitude of my former existence, my hands maneuvering with a purpose they had not sensed in years. I perforated every sheet with 3 holes. I arranged them temporally with dated dividers for each segment. The financier grievances, the corporate deception ploy, the national advance deceit. When I concluded, I inserted the nearly 300 sheets into a robust 3-ring folder. I utilized a black indelible marker and a straight edge, and in tidy capital letters, I inscribed the heading on a white tag and attached it to the spine and front of the folder. It read, Case File Michael Hayes, Possible National Electronic and Financial Institution Deceit. It was no longer a compilation of documents. It was a formal charge, an expert portfolio outlining the monetary existence and offenses of my son-in-law. Back at the residence, I entered my workspace. I knelt and rotated the combination on my aged vault. The mechanisms engaged with a recognizable sound. I opened the substantial metal door. The interior was mostly vacant, merely a few ancient land titles and my wife's ornament container. I removed everything, leaving the dusty inside entirely empty. Then I positioned the weighty folder, the case dossier, squarely in the middle of the vault. It was the sole item within. I regarded it for an extended moment. Michael presumed this vault contained his bounty, his effortless legacy, the currency that would resolve all his issues. He was mistaken. The vault did contain a bounty, but it was not mine. It was the reality, a reality that was now a charged armament, waiting serenely in the obscurity for him to enter and activate it. I closed the substantial door. The securing mechanism engaged with a profound, conclusive thud. The snare was primed, the stronghold was constructed, and the snare was primed. All that remained was to await. I did not have to await long. For 3 weeks, there was a strained quietude. The weekend visits halted. Emily called once, her tone tense, stating Michael was laboring on a major deadline. I knew it was a falsehood. He was depleting time. His lenders were encroaching. I could almost sense his urgency emanating across the metropolis. He was a trapped creature, and trapped creatures always perform the foreseeable action. They pounce at the one objective they deem the most vulnerable. The recording from the compact spherical camera in my workspace was even more incriminating than I could have anticipated. The time mark indicated 3:27 a.m. The residence was utterly dark, silent, except for the subdued hum of the cooler. Then a silhouette separated from the deeper obscurity of the corridor. It was Michael. He advanced with an awkward form of stealth, a man unused to manual exertion, his every stride a potential revelation. I observed on the footage as he stiffened when a plank groaned under his mass, his head jerking toward my sleeping chamber door, his respiration suspended in a frenzied stillness. He assumed I was profoundly asleep, assisted by the cardiac remedy I ingested nightly, a detail he had undoubtedly relied upon. He slinked into my workspace, a compact illuminator clutched in his quivering hand. The slender ray flickered across my workstation, my bookcase, the images of my wife, and a younger, more joyful Emily. He disregarded them all. His objective was the sturdy oak workstation where I stored my documents. He knelt, his motions gradual and intentional, and softly tugged the handle of the upper right drawer. He knew precisely where I kept the reserve key to the vault. He had observed me access it numerous times. The drawer glided open with a gentle, timbered exhalation. The camera's night vision lens displayed the contents in spectral monochrome. A few aged writing instruments, some fasteners, a coil of postage, and positioned directly atop, the small silver key. But it was not solitary. Resting beside it was a recently reproduced 5x7 image. On the footage, I witnessed Michael hesitate. His hand lingered over the key. He directed his illuminator downward to obtain a clearer view of the picture. Even in the pixelated recording, I knew what he was perceiving. It was a capture I had obtained and reproduced that very day. It was a duplicate of an ultimate notification message from a high-rate creditor directed to him. The header, even in monochrome, blared with exigency. Account delinquent. Prompt measures mandated. It was one of the numerous obligations I had revealed in my probe. I had positioned it there as an ultimate caution, a mute indication for him to retreat, to depart. It was an opportunity for him to halt, to reassess the chasm he was about to plunge into. I observed as his posture drooped. He seized the image. His eyes expanded with a blend of dread and bewilderment. He surveyed the dim chamber, as if anticipating me to emerge from the gloom. How I could almost hear him murmur, "How could I possibly be aware of this?" For a complete 15 seconds, he was immobilized. He was positioned at a junction. One route led back through the door into the night, to confront the repercussions of his own creation. The other route led to my vault. Then I perceived the alteration. His urgency, a more potent force than his dread, assumed control. He shook his head, a swift rejecting motion. He likely convinced himself it was an odd happenstance, a correspondence I had somehow intercepted. He could not permit himself to accept the reality, because the reality was too horrifying, that I knew that I was awaiting him. He crammed the image into his pocket, grasped the key, and softly sealed the drawer. He had received his ultimate caution, and he had disregarded it. He arose and pivoted toward the aged metal vault in the corner. He had made his election. On the security footage, I observed him approach the vault like a man nearing a shrine. He knelt, his motions awkward with a mix of avarice and dread. He inserted the silver key into the mechanism. It produced a grating noise in the silent chamber, a noise that seemed to resonate with the conclusiveness of his choice. He rotated the key, and the securing system released with a weighty, gratifying clank. He tugged the handle, and the dense metal door creaked open, its pivots complaining after years of inactivity. This was the instant his whole frantic scheme had been directing toward. He directed the thin, unsteady ray of his device's illuminator into the dim interior. And then he stiffened. I could discern the bewilderment on his countenance, even in the pixelated night vision image. He was anticipating bundles of $100 notes, perhaps ancient investment bonds, precious metals, the cliched hoard of a mistrustful elder. He anticipated a bounty. Instead, the illuminator ray revealed nothing but vacant gray metal and positioned solitary in the very center, a single substantial 3-ring folder. He extended hesitantly, his fingers grazing the plain synthetic cover as if he feared it might scorch him. He extracted it. It was heavier than he anticipated. He directed the light onto the front, his forehead creased. I observed the precise instant his mind processed the words on the tag. The words I had so meticulously inscribed. Case file Michael Hayes. The hue drained from his visage. It was a visible corporeal reaction, like a lever being activated. He transitioned from a covetous burglar to a horrified youth in a solitary pulse. His hands quivered as he opened the folder. He did not commence at the start. He tore through the sheets frantically, his respiration arriving in uneven, shallow inhalations. The camera could not view the sheets, but I knew what he was perceiving. He was perceiving his own visage gazing back at him from duplicates of his identification. He was perceiving his own endorsement, a assured, haughty flourish at the base of the deceptive SPP advance submission. He was perceiving the reproduced, enraged words of the financiers he had defrauded, their charges and menaces compiled and categorized. He was perceiving the complex network of falsehoods he had devoted years weaving, all of it unraveled, exposed, and presented to him as a formal charge under the solitary, pitiful ray of his device's illuminator. He sank back on his heels, the open folder resting on his lap like a gravestone. He appeared utterly, hopelessly vanquished. That was my signal. I had been positioned in the obscured corridor just beyond the workspace door, my own device in my grasp. Capturing, I stepped into the threshold, my aged footwear producing no noise on the timber floor. He was so engrossed by his terror that he did not even detect me. "Find what you were seeking." "Michael," I inquired. My tone was subdued, conversational, but it severed through the chamber's silence like a blade. He shrieked, a brief, choked yelp of pure horror, and scrambled rearward, dropping the folder. The sheets cascaded across the floor in a torrent of white. His illuminator clattered to the ground, its ray now directed at the ceiling, casting erratic, dancing obscurity across the chamber. He stared at me, his eyes expanded in the dimness, his mouth opening and closing like a creature extracted from liquid. He perceived the device in my grasp. He perceived the small, malevolent crimson light in the corner of the display. The light that informed him this instant was being documented, that it was authentic and indisputable. Virgil. He stammered, his thoughts racing for a justification, for any falsehood that could conceivably suit the madness of this instant. He propelled himself upward, attempting to recover some semblance of poise. I thought I detected a disturbance. He erupted, the words tumbling over one another. "I was concerned for you. I arrived to verify, and I saw the vault was ajar. I was merely ensuring everything was fine." It was a pitiful falsehood, so tenuous and transparent that it was in itself a profound affront, A frigid fury, pure and more rigid than anything I had ever experienced, ascended within me. I took a gradual step into the chamber. "Do not," I stated, and the solitary word severed him instantly. My tone was subdued, but it bore the weight of every falsehood, every currency unit, every restless night he had ever induced. "Do not dare affront my intellect again. Not this evening. Not ever again." I elevated my device slightly, ensuring the lens had a clear perspective of his visage. "I believe you have had sufficient of the obscurity. Michael, let us have a little illumination on the matter." I proceeded to my workstation and activated the small blue banker's lamp. A warm, concentrated pool of light brightened the disorder on the floor. The dispersed sheets of his charge. He recoiled as if the illumination itself was an accusation. He positioned there, trapped between the vacant vault and the proof of his offenses. "You were not verifying my safety." I proceeded, my tone calm, systematic, the tone of an examiner presenting his discoveries. "You were here to pilfer from me. You presume that vault contained my lifelong reserves. You presume you have an entitlement to it. You presume I am a foolish elder you can control and discard." I permitted the words to linger in the atmosphere briefly. "You are erroneous on all accounts." I motioned with my device toward the documents on the floor. "That is what the vault contained. Not my bounty. Yours. The complete reckoning of your existence." "Michael, let us discuss the Relief Act. It is the national legislation that financed the Salary Safeguarding Program. I imagine you are acquainted with it, since you obtained $200,000 from it. What you might not be acquainted with are the sanctions for submitting false details on the submission. Are you aware that SPP advanced deceit can carry a sentence of up to 30 years in national incarceration and a penalty of up to $500,000? His visage, already pallid, seemed to disintegrate. The final remnant of arrogant bravado drained from him, leaving behind the emptied husk of a horrified man. He knew in that instant that this was not merely a familial dispute. He had not been apprehended by a fragile father-in-law. He had been apprehended by a specialist, and he had just willingly entered a flawlessly built, inescapable snare. For an extended moment, the sole noise in the chamber was Michael's uneven respiration. I perceived a sequence of sentiments play across his visage. The preliminary shock yielded to an emerging, boundless horror. But beneath that, as he realized that every escape path had been sealed, a new sentiment began to sour. Pure, bestial rage. When a man like Michael, who has constructed his whole existence on falsehoods and allure, is deprived of his capacity to manipulate, all that remains is the repulsive, savage essence. His eyes constricted, his shoulders tightened, and he lowered himself into a slight stoop, like a beast readying to lunge. "You aged imbecile," he growled, his tone a low, guttural rasp. "You think you have triumphed. You think you can destroy me." He advanced a step toward me, his hands tightening into fists. His intent was evident. If he could not converse his way out, he would attempt to force his way out. He would seize my device, demolish the proof in the chamber, and then fabricate a tale about a bewildered elder experiencing a tumble. It was his ultimate frantic maneuver. But I had foreseen this. I did not recoil. I did not retreat a step. I merely maintained his stare, my own demeanor inscrutable. "Before you commit something, you will lament even more than you lament this evening," I stated, my tone perfectly serene. "There is one additional detail you should know." My serenity seemed to infuriate him further, but it also caused him to waver. He halted a few paces away from me. "That folder," I stated, nodding toward the documents dispersed at his feet, is a tangible duplicate, a accessory, you might say, for this minor drama of ours. The authentic dossier, the comprehensive electronic portfolio with all the proof, the recording from this lens, and an endorsed certified declaration from me, detailing this evening's occurrences, was transferred to a secure system 3 hours ago. I perceived a spark of bewilderment in his eyes. He did not comprehend. Consider it as a safeguard policy. Michael, I clarified gradually, as if to a youth, when I transferred that dossier, I dispatched a connection to my attorney, Robert Lawson. That message is residing in his receipt box presently. Attached to that message is an instruction configured on a timer. If I do not input a particular code on my device by 9:00 tomorrow morning, exactly 7 hours and 23 minutes from now, that instruction will automatically activate, and the message with the complete unaltered dossier will be irrevocably transmitted to the United States Prosecutor's Office for the District of California. The sole individual on this world who possesses that code, the sole individual who can halt that message from being dispatched, is me. I permitted the words to absorb. I observed his visage as the full ramification of what I had stated dawned on him. His fists gradually relaxed. The rage in his eyes was supplanted by a new, more profound, and utterly despairing hopelessness. His corporeal menace was meaningless. If he touched me, if he so much as marked my limb, he would be guaranteeing that the message would be dispatched. He would be securing his own passage to a national correctional facility. I had removed his ultimate maneuver from the field. Checkmate. He merely positioned there, swaying faintly, a marionette with its cords severed. He was finally entirely and utterly shattered. Now, I stated, my tone softening marginally, I think it is time we involve my daughter in this dialogue. His head jerked upward, a fresh surge of panic in his eyes. No, he murmured. Do not, please. Virgil, not Emily. This has always concerned Emily. I responded. I looked downward at my device, which was still capturing, and my thumb navigated across the display. I shifted away from the recording application and pressed the symbol for a visual call. The chiming filled the strained silence of the workspace, each note an impossibly resounding proclamation of the impending reckoning. After 4 chimes, the call linked. Emily's visage appeared on my display. She was in repose, her locks disheveled, her visage gentle with slumber. She appeared perplexed and anxious. Dad, she stated, her tone thick with sleep. What is it? Is everything all right? It is the middle of the night. My whole bearing altered. The frigid, rigid accuser was absent, supplanted by the tender, concerned parent. Emily, dear, I stated, my tone full of warmth and worry. I am so sorry to rouse you, but I need you to come to the house immediately. What is wrong? She inquired, sitting up right now, fully alert. Are you injured? Did you tumble? No, I am fine, I reassured her. But something has occurred, something significant. And your husband, Michael, he is here with me. There is something he needs to clarify to both of us. Can you please just attire yourself and come over? Then I need you here. Michael is there, she inquired, her perplexity deepening. But he is right here in bed beside. Oh my God. I could hear the rustle of linens as she turned to discover the vacant space beside her. Just come over, sweetheart, I stated gently. Then I performed the ultimate necessary and most brutal action. I shifted my device's lens away from my own visage. I directed it toward the scene in my workspace. Through my display, I perceived what she was now perceiving. She was perceiving her husband Michael standing pallid and vanquished, a specter in the lamplight. She was perceiving the open, vacant vault behind him, its door suspended ajar like a yawning lesion, and she was perceiving the floor at his feet, strewn with the white sheets of the case dossier that bore his name. I maintained the lens there, firm, allowing the image to etch itself into her recollection. I observed her visage on my display as her expression transitioned from perplexity to incredulity, and then finally to the initial fractures of a devastating and world-shattering comprehension. It felt like an eternity before I heard the sound of a vehicle entering the driveway, the motor ceasing abruptly. A vehicle door closed forcefully, and a moment later, the front entrance of the house burst open. Emily rushed into the chamber, her visage pale and her eyes wide with alarm. She was still in her nightclothes with a jacket hastily draped over them. Her gaze flew past me and landed on Michael, standing amidst the scattered documents like a man marooned on an isle of his own creation. Before I could utter a word, Michael saw his opportunity. He lunged not at me but at her, his last and most potent shield. He raised his hands in a gesture of utter desperation. "Emily, thank heaven," he cried, his tone cracking with a masterful dramatic panic. "You must assist me. Your father, he has lost his senses. He has gone mad." He directed a quivering finger at me. He enticed me here. Speaking of an intrusion, it was a trap. He has been reproducing things from the web, fabricating these wild tales. He thinks I am some sort of offender. Look at this. He gestured wildly at the mess on the floor. He is not well. Emily, we need to summon someone. We need to get him assistance. It was a brilliant, despicable performance. He was attempting to transform the situation from a criminal admission into a medical crisis, with me as the sufferer. Emily looked from his frantic visage to my calm one, her own expression a mask of confusion and fear. She was caught in the crossfire, and her instinct was to believe her husband. I raised a hand, a simple appeasing gesture. "Emily," I stated, my tone gentle, completely devoid of the anger from moments before. "I know this is confusing, and I am so sorry to do this to you, but he is not going to get help by lying anymore. I am not going to get help by pretending anymore. All I ask is that you stand right there and you listen. You do not have to believe me. Just listen to the facts." I knelt down, my old knees protesting, and began to gather the scattered pages. I was no longer an accuser. I was a presenter. This was my den, but it had become my courtroom. I picked up 2 specific sheets of paper. I stood up and walked over to my daughter, holding them out for her. "This," I stated, pointing to the first page, "is a copy of the application for a salary safeguarding program loan filed by Hayes Ventures LLC 3 years ago. As you can see, the requested amount was $200,000. And right here, it states the company employs 20 people. And this," I stated, pointing to his familiar confident signature at the bottom, "is your husband's name." I then held up the second sheet. "And this is the official payroll tax filing from the state for the same company for the same year. As you can see right here in this box, the number of employees is listed as 0. It has been listed as 0 for the entire 6 years the company has existed." I did not say he lied. I did not say this is fraud. I just held the 2 documents side by side. Both of these documents cannot be true. Emily, one of them is a lie submitted to the federal government. I dropped those pages and picked up another, a printout from one of the investor forums, This is a post from a woman named Patricia Evans, a retired librarian from Texas, I stated, my tone quiet. I read her words aloud. I gave Mr. Hayes my entire pension fund, $50,000. He promised me it was a secure investment in sustainable energy that would help me cover my spouse's healthcare costs. I have not heard from him in 9 months. The phone number is disconnected. I do not know what to do. He has ruined my life. I picked up another page. This is an email from Michael to that same woman, sent a week before she invested. Look, I stated, holding it out for Emily to see. He is promising her a 250% return in less than 2 years. An impossible predatory lie designed to prey on her hope. I let the paper fall to the floor. I did not need to show her anymore. The truth was now in the room. A living, breathing entity more real and more solid than any of Michael's lies had ever been. Emily had been looking at the papers, but now her gaze lifted to her husband's face. Her expression was no longer confused. It was shattered. The final conflict, the final judgment, was not mine to deliver. It was hers. Tears began to stream down her face, silent and hot. Her voice was a broken whisper. Michael, she stated, and his name sounded like a prayer and a curse. Look at me. He could not. His eyes darted around the room, from the vault to the floor to me, anywhere but at his wife. Michael, please, she begged, her voice cracking. Just look at me and tell me it is not true. Tell me my father is lying. Tell me this is all just some horrible, insane mistake. She was giving him one last chance, one final opportunity to construct a lie that she could cling to, a thread she could use to try and stitch their life back together. All he had to do was look her in the eye and deny it. But he could not. He opened his mouth, and a small, strangled sound emerged, but no words followed. He stared at a spot on the wall just over her shoulder, his jaw working silently. He did not have to say a word. His silence was the loudest confession I had ever heard. It was the sound of the hollow man finally admitting he was empty. And in that silence, I watched my daughter's heart break. The sound of my daughter's quiet sobbing was the only thing that filled the room. Michael stood frozen, a statue of a man finally stripped of all his lies. The performance was over. It was time for the sentencing. I walked over to the briefcase I had placed by the door when I first entered the study. I opened it and took out 2 documents, which I had placed in a neat manila folder. I walked to the coffee table in the center of the living room, a space where we had shared so many family moments, so many carefully constructed lies. I placed the 2 documents on the polished wood surface side by side. Then I placed a black fountain pen neatly on top of them. Emily looked up, her tear-streaked face a question. Michael's eyes were fixed on the papers as if they were coiled snakes. The first document, I stated, my voice calm and clear, breaking the painful silence, is a petition for dissolution of marriage, divorce papers. My lawyer drafted them this morning. They are quite simple. They state that all marital assets will revert to their original owner, and you will make no future claims on my daughter's finances, inheritance, or property. I tapped the second document. This one is a full and detailed confession. It has also been prepared by my lawyer. It outlines the fraudulent application for the Salary Safeguarding Program loan. It details the investor scams related to your shell company, Prospect Capital Global. It is a complete admission of guilt for the federal crimes you have committed. It is concise, accurate, and legally binding. I then looked directly at Michael, and for the first time all night, He was forced to meet my gaze. There was nothing left in his eyes. No anger, no fear, just a hollow, empty void. "You have two choices," I stated, my voice leaving no room for negotiation. "This is the last decision you will ever get to make in connection with this family. Path number 1. You will sign both of these documents right now. You will then go to your home, pack a single bag, and you will walk out of my daughter's life forever. You will never call her, text her, or contact her in any way ever again. In exchange for your signature and your complete disappearance, I will make a phone call, and I will cancel the 9 a.m. appointment your future has with the United States Prosecutor's Office. You will walk away with nothing but the clothes on your back. But you will be free." I let that sink in before I presented the alternative. Path number 2. You refuse to sign. You call my bluff. You can walk out of this house right now, and at 9:00 a.m. tomorrow morning, when that email is automatically sent, your life will cease to be your own. It will belong to the federal justice system. You will face a trial, and with the evidence in that binder, you will be convicted. You will go to prison for a very, very long time. I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice. "And just so we are crystal clear, Michael, just so you do not get any ideas about trying to win Emily back later to get to her money. All of my assets, this house, my portfolio, everything, have been placed into an irrevocable trust. The terms of that trust, which I signed last week, explicitly state that my daughter cannot access the principal of her inheritance as long as she is legally married to you. There is nothing left for you here, not a single penny. The bank is closed." I stood back up straight. The choice was his. A life of freedom and exile or a life in a cage. I had taken everything from him. His wife, his future, his lies. And in return, I was offering him the one thing he did not deserve: a chance to walk away. The pen lay on the table between us. The entire future of our family was balanced on its small, sharp point. Michael took the pen. In the crushing silence of the room, the only sound was the scratching of his signature. First on the confession, then on the divorce papers. He did not look at Emily. He did not look at me. He placed the pen back on the table, turned, and walked out of the house without a word. I made the call, and the 9:00 a.m. email was canceled. Just like that. Like a ghost in the night. He was gone. The months that followed were quiet. The healing was slow, and it was not easy. There were tears, and there was a profound, aching silence where 15 years of a shared life used to be. But slowly, a new kind of normal began to grow in the space that the lies had left behind. We find ourselves now at my kitchen table on a sunny Saturday morning. The light streams in, the same light from that first morning I began my investigation. But it feels different now. Warmer, cleaner. On the table between us is not a fancy meal, but the annual report of a publicly traded company. I have a cup of coffee. Emily has a cup of tea. Her brow is furrowed in concentration, not in sadness. "Look here," I say, my finger tracing a line on the balance sheet. "See their debt-to-equity ratio. It has been climbing for 4 straight quarters, but their press releases all talk about expansion. What story do those two facts tell you when you put them together?" She is quiet for a long moment, studying the numbers. Then she looks up at me, and her eyes are clear, sharp. "They are borrowing to fuel their growth," she says. "They are expanding faster than their revenue can support. It is a house of cards, I smile. A real, genuine smile. Exactly, I say. A house of cards. In that moment, she looks at me, and I can see something shift in her gaze. For the first time in so many years, she is not looking at a frail, elderly father who needs to be managed or placated. She is seeing the man I used to be, the man I still am. She is seeing a protector, a teacher. She is seeing a father who loved her enough to risk her hatred in order to save her from a slow, creeping ruin. A silent giant who had stood guard over her life even when she had not known it. Her own smile is small and a little sad, but it is real, and it is a new beginning. I spent my entire life searching for the truth in columns of numbers, in ledgers, and in balance sheets. I believed that if you could just make the numbers add up, you could understand the world. But on that long, terrible night, I learned that the most important truth is not found in a case file. It is found in the freedom of someone you love. My safe was not empty after all. It never was. It held the most valuable asset I ever possessed, a gift more precious than any amount of money. It held the truth, and that truth finally set my daughter free. This story teaches a powerful lesson. True protection for those we love often demands that we create the very conflict we have spent years trying to avoid. Virgil's desire for peace allowed a web of deceit to grow. But his decision to seek the truth, no matter how painful, was his greatest act of fatherly love. He proved that the most valuable inheritance is not money held in a trust, but wisdom and self-reliance shared across a kitchen table. Ultimately, the story shows that real strength is the courage to present a difficult truth that empowers others to find their own freedom. Share with us in the comments. What do you believe is the most powerful lesson a parent can pass on to their, if you like this story? Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.